On tonight's Cover One Buffalo podcast, we are Gregless. It is Joe DeBosa and I, and we're going to take you through the first wave of the Buffalo Bills free agency. But first, our guys at Handsome Jack.
Broadcasting live to Bills Mafia worldwide with Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn.
Welcome to the NFL. Doesn't matter what's happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
Your number one podcast for objective Buffalo Bills coverage. No matter where you are, we got you covered.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not Greg Thompson, but I am Aaron Quinn. And tonight I am joined here on the Cover One Buffalo podcast, presented by William Mattar Law Offices, with my man, Joe DeRosa. You guys know Joe. What's going on, Joe? How are you, my man?
Hello, Mr. Aaron Quinn. I am also not Greg Thompson, but I do very much appreciate you letting me guest on this show. I think this is my first time ever being on C1 Buff, and this is a huge honor. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sorry it took us so long. We actually don't guest appearance a ton. We have a couple during the year. We work our way through the Cover One staff, so I'm glad that we've made it to you. I know I've done your show a few times. People that have joined our Cover One and Friends Twitter spaces are familiar with your work and join us on there. And if you aren't familiar with Joe's show, please make sure that you check that out here on the Cover One YouTube channel. Joe, I'm excited to have you here. Greg is traveling for work. The schedule just didn't work. We were going to try to record last night and then launch it, but then we're like, man, it's free agency. Like anything could happen between now and then. And so we didn't want to miss out on anything, but honestly, we could have probably recorded last night. We wouldn't have missed too much in terms of Brandon Beane didn't do a crazy amount here today on Wednesday, the actual official day that the 2025 NFL season starts and free agency becomes official. A lot of it has been done here during that quote unquote legal tampering window. But we did have a little bit of news here before we get into the free agency side of stuff, Joe. I just want to touch over some of the news bits that we saw. And one was actually in association with another deal. And we saw Alana Getzberg write about this in her about Joey Bosa, about that move happening. She talked about the Ed Oliver restructure. So Ed Oliver restructures his deal, which saved $10.6 million in the cap this year, adds a couple void years to the end of his contract. So sort of in the line of what Howie Roseman does and saving some cash now, spreading that cash out over the life of a contract, past the life of a contract. So Ed Oliver restructured. Not a lot of news there, right? Like Ed Oliver is going to be part of this team. He's going to probably live out his contract, and then you're going to have to pay additionally for those void years. But seeing them be aggressive to open up that cap space now is a good sign.
Oh, absolutely. And with someone like Ed, who you kind of consider a mainstay for this Bills defense, that kind of thing is always welcomed. Not even just for the fact that Ed has been productive since the contract extension, but also because I just like adding the years, or at the very least kicking the can for a position like his, where even if, let's say Ed gets older and, well, he will. Ed gets older and maybe the play isn't meant to be starting caliber, I'm still pretty comfortable with the back half of his contract being for someone who would be a bit of a rotational piece if you do add someone to kind of inherit that spot. But even then, I don't think Ed's showing any signs of slowing down yet. He's only 27, turns 28 in December. This was a no-brainer, and I think the immediate cap savings you're getting are going to be very helpful for whatever deals they decide to do forward, whether that's finding a CB2 if they still need to go get one, not if, yes, they still need to go get one, or if they want to just do more transactions towards the summer, towards training camp and throughout the year. They have a lot more cushion, a lot more flexibility. So I'm very happy to hear it. And I think it was expected by a lot of people to happen too.
Yeah. I don't know the exact estimates right now or where the cap is. As of my recording and doing research before this show, we still haven't seen the exact details on the Palmer deal. There's a couple of the other 1-year deals that we don't know the exacts on those. DeMar Hamlin was one. I don't know. Forrest was another one. So the cap is in flux right now. I don't know where an estimate was at. If Greg is here watching and in the chat, if you've got an estimate, you can kick us, go for it. Otherwise, I'm assuming that they're just giving themselves a little bit of buffer here, which is a good thing to have. In other news here too, my sign is not up tonight. Omari asking where is the sign? No, actually my kids took it. They were playing. It's been sunny and nice out here in Buffalo, and so they were playing outside. So they used it as a scoreboard, and it got totally screwed up. So I have a new sign on the way, and an identical sign on the way. I was not happy about it. I don't think they realized how important to this little niche market that I have of my Woody Page sign being up here. But yeah, no, it's totally destroyed. They totally messed that thing up. It got all covered in snow and ice, and but they had a fun time with it, so who cares? Another piece of news we got here this afternoon as the league year was ramping in, Kaiir Elam traded to the Dallas Cowboys. The Bills get a 2025 5th round pick, a 2026 7th round pick, and the Cowboys get Kaiir Elam and a 2025 6th round pick. So essentially swapping that 6th for a 5th, you pick up the future 7th, and you kind of rid your hands of the Kaiir Elam experiment. And he gets to go over to Dallas, which I actually think is a much better fit for Kaiir Elam. And I hope that he lands there and is able to progress into a productive player. I wish nothing but the best for Kaiir Elam, but man, I won't lie, Joe. Like, I don't like to talk negative about players. It's really not my style to harp on the negativity. But I didn't want to watch Kaiir Elam play football for the Buffalo Bills anymore. So I think, the Bills probably felt that way a little bit, and kudos to Brandon Beane for being able to get something for him. Cause I think the whole NFL world knew this relationship was over. So getting just anything for him feels like a win for the Bills.
Absolutely. And it's an unfortunate situation because anytime you have a first round pick at a position of need, you kind of give yourself the rose colored glasses that they're going to work out. It's going to be exactly what you envisioned when you take them. But this is a reality for a lot of teams, not just the Bills, that your first round picks don't always work out. And for Kaiir Elam being someone that had traits and they were really hoping those traits would develop, the progression just simply wasn't there from year to year. Maybe there were gasps and flashes in certain moments, like the Kansas City game his rookie year or the Pittsburgh interception, but that was also paired with being out of position or being burnt in coverage or committing a really egregious penalty. And I think going into this year, Aaron, I mean, on my show and just really throughout the Twitter space and anyone I talked to, I was very optimistic about Kaiir Elam because, you bring in Coach Adai and you get a little bit more of a draw into man coverage. Maybe the rates go up, and maybe that lends itself well to Kaiir Elam and his development in this Bills defense. And even with Rasul Douglas, it seemed like Kaiir Elam was the de facto CB3, that like he was just going to run away with that backup boundary role. And it might have been a nice world to live in with him where, yeah, he's not really playing up to the first round potential, but he might still have relevance in this defense, might still be able to flash, and maybe you build off that. But it just didn't happen consistently. It just never came to fruition. And I'm happy that the Bills were able to see this too and just move on before it got even worse. And frankly, it's unfortunate, but like you said, no ill will to the guy, is obviously still trying to develop and find a place in this league. And I hope he does in Dallas, because really, I have no reason to root against him. Again, I think the talent is there, but he's just got to be in a position where he can be counted on and he could get the reps. And also just hopefully the playbook translates better there than it did here. But thank God we have Christian Benford, because otherwise it would look a lot worse. Yeah. And it's good to know that in that very same draft, you essentially had the Kyle Williams situation, but in the cornerback room.
Yeah. Right here, Roy Collins with a Elam was a panic pick by Bean. I do think this was one of the few scenarios we've seen with the Bills. Bean's not perfect, and he doesn't have a perfect draft record. He doesn't have a perfect free agency record for sure. I think he's better than most of his peers in both these areas in terms of building a roster. But this was one of the few where I don't have the inside information on what led to the pick, but it seemed this was one of the ones where it was more like outside of the needs for the team in terms of what the team does. They were it looked like the GM was kind of wanting to go in a bit of a different direction than maybe the coaching staff was. And we heard, some reports that John Butler didn't love Kaiir Elam as a fit in the defense when he was a defensive backs coach. And so I'd love to have been a fly in the room during that draft, especially with a first round pick, to hear the conversations of why Kaiir Elam. I know obviously you just came off that 13 seconds loss. The speed of Kansas City was real. People said, they had to be playing more man. They really didn't. This year we saw an uptick in man, but that took a few years since the Kaiir Elam draft to where they were doing some more of that stuff. And I think I talked to Cody Alexander this afternoon. I was on his podcast and talked to him. I think some of that single high stuff that the Bills were doing this year was more a product of not wanting to leave nickel, but wanting to stop the run. So getting into some more single high looks, which led you into a little bit more man coverage, not necessarily Sean McDermott wanting to philosophically change and go that way. And so this is honestly a good example of whether it's free agency or draft is sometimes you might have a guy that is a better athlete and presents more traits on paper, but he isn't a better fit, right? Like the Bills got more production out of Dane Jackson than they ever did out of Kaiir Elam. And if you looked at the two of them as just prospects on paper, Kaiir Elam stands out as light years ahead and above. He is first round, second round quality athlete and present all these things, but not being a fit leads to a lack of production. And so I think it is important that sometimes you look at a RAS score, you look at some of these things as we start to get into draft mode after these couple of rounds of free agency. It's important to know the Bills fits. And that's one thing I will say I've learned a lot from working with Eric Turner here over the years is finding what he knows better than anybody with his success rate, as you can see, in finding targets for the Bills, what they're looking for. And a lot of times it's not the freak athletes that the fan base wants. And so not to spend any more time on that. What I do want to get into, though, is before we get into the free agent acquisitions and the new shiny toys and stuff, the Bills handled some of their own business here before free agency started here, and even before the legal tampering really kicked off. And I put up a graphic during the year about those 2026 upcoming free agents as they were playing well, right? Like Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir having a great year and looking ahead and being like, man, what are these decisions going to be? Who are we going to sign? James Cook's on that list, right? Christian Benford, guy we just talked about, also probably on that list. Patton, confused by me here being on the left and Greg not being here. We're messing with the regulars here tonight. It's all right.
It's my fault.
Connor McGovern, probably also a guy that's on this 2026 looking ahead list. And Brandon Beane did what good GMs do, and he got to work here early. You saw it with Terrell Bernard getting a 4-year, $50 million extension. Khalil Shakir getting his $4 million, $53 million extension. Greg Rousseau getting a 4-year, $80 million extension. Reed Ferguson, snap flow out of nowhere, getting a 4-year deal. And then the big one, Josh Allen getting his 6-year, $330 million. And we heard the interview in the press conference with Josh talking about how he really wanted to help the team in the cap situation and not make that something that was going to hinder the team in any way. He wanted to give them that flexibility. You love hearing that from a big ticket item like Josh. Joe, this is after decades of just mismanagement of this team in the front office. Again, Brandon Beane's not perfect. He's made mistakes, but dude, this is what good GMs do to prevent you from having to go crazy here in these first waves of free agency.
And you've seen so many examples of it around the league of teams that just simply wait too long. I mean, I could even look at Dallas as an example, right? Like so many times they handcuff themselves into having to pay the biggest cash out they have to pay because they simply don't get ahead of it. And I think you're right about Brandon Beane not being perfect. No GM is, but Brandon Beane has definitely had his shortcomings as the GM for the Bills. But one thing that I think he does incredibly well that I've been consistently impressed with and very comfortable with when it comes to the long-term security of young stars on this team is how early he is to the punch on extending them. And why I love it so much really lies in two factors. One, you're locking down the security. You're getting the player to stay for you for the foreseeable future, but you're also getting them at a rate that can be exceeded by their play. So when you looked at Ed Oliver, and I cited this on my show yesterday when I had David Tilton on from Air Raid, one of the things I pointed to was Ed's contract. Ed's contract was, we got on it early because he gave us like a pretty good year, but not elite. And then he followed it up with what I would consider the best year of his career. And that value on that contract was just absurd. And I think what you do now when you look at Shakir, when you look at Bernard, Greg Rousseau, I guess Reed Ferguson could be in this conversation too, if you quantify the really good snaps or the pretty snaps. But Greg Rousseau, Terrell Bernard, Khalil Shakir statistically can have the best years of their careers next year. They're all still young. They all still have a prime that they can realistically hit. And if they do so, then these contracts just are at the best rate you could possibly have as an organization. And that is a lot of credit I can give to Brandon Beane, and why I'm just so pleased that he got all of this done, because again, you want to have your young players, you want to have your cornerstones, but now you have them. You can get the great play from them if they do develop. You can add draft picks to it and just fortify the depth in addition to them, not hamstring yourself if you want to get free agents. And even more importantly, if they aren't as good as right now, then the deal you signed them to is what they are right now. So it's not even going to be objectively terrible value unless these players, God forbid, go down with an injury or have just one of the most unprecedented drop-offs you could imagine. So I'm extremely pleased that he locked these players down. And as far as Brandon Beane and getting on these contracts, I think it's his best trade as the Bills GM. I think so many people point to the Bills organization as kind of the standard for this kind of transaction, the standard of, we want to secure these players. We're not going to let these players hit the open market. We know how valuable they are to us. Now it's just a matter of hitting the draft correctly, getting really good value picks this year, building upon it, and really combining the two factors to make a roster that just for the foreseeable future is going to be one of the top in the NFL, and hopefully get you that championship that you just so desperately want to see.
Yeah, this is what good teams do, right? For years, the Packers used to do this. The Patriots did this during their run. The Steelers take care of their own. Teams that stay good for long periods of time are able to retain their own homegrown talent that you've invested in. Obviously, the Josh Allen one is a no-brainer. I say it all the time, Joe. He's the most valuable asset in all of Western New York. So there's no amount of money you could throw at this guy that would sway me from it being worth it. So that one's a no-brainer. But I do think there was some kind of hemming and hawing amongst Bills Mafia about Greg Rousseau and where is he at, and is he elite, and where is he at in his development, and is he a guy to move forward with? I think 4 years, $80 million, that contract over the next couple of years is going to look like a huge value. I do think people forget that he was playing like wide receiver and tight end not that long ago, 6 years ago, just came into being a defensive end, very young guy, still has plenty of development to go. But one statistic that I like to use is Hoecht rating, which measures, tackle for loss, forced fumbles, along with sacks, QB hits, many things, and gives you a metric of how impactful to the game, not just sacks. I think too many people put too much precedent on just sacks. He ranked 8th among all edges in the NFL in creating havoc plays. And I think there's more for him to grow into. So getting him done early this is a premier position where if he hits the free market next year, somebody's going to pay for those traits alone. He's already got decent production. It's not elite production, but he's got decent production with traits, and he's young. Someone was going to pay him big money for that. Bernard is sort of the opposite, where he has the production. Every time he's struggled maybe to stay healthy at times, but Terrell Bernard, when he's on the field, we saw it in the playoffs, makes big plays. He just gets his hands on the ball. It's the opposite of Tremaine Edmonds. Tremaine Edmonds is still a good player, right? He went out and got a bunch of money. He got paid big time by the Bears. He is a good player for the Bears, but people were frustrated with his lack of playmaking ability. You get the opposite with Terrell Bernard. You get nothing but playmaking ability and getting his hands on the ball. And so he's your captain, solidifies that on the defense long-term. And then I could go on for a very long time tonight about my excitement about Khalil Shakir. And I don't think he had his best season yet this past year and really put himself on the national stage. You started to hear really smart people talk about him as being one of the more dynamic wide receivers. I think people are kind of on the cusp of, he is like almost like a St. Brown to Detroit. Like he's that type of player that can be that type of dynamic player that they have. He's right there on the cusp of just breaking through to that next elite stratosphere. And at 4 years, $53 million, that deal's going to look absolutely fantastic, I think. And he's a Josh Allen safety blanket. So Josh likes him. You got to get that stuff done. I think people think because they did all these and got through the window and hit into free agency that Benford isn't getting done. And I don't know that that is the case. There's still plenty of time for a deal to get worked out with Benford. My concern with that, though, Joe, is JC Horn got a pretty substantial deal here from the Panthers, which I actually don't think is a great deal for the Panthers.
No.
I'm not super high on JC Horn, actually. But Benford's agents have to be liking the way that goes. And even if it's similar to that deal, I think the Bills got to get it done and make it worth it and get Benford done here. But that's the one kind of lingering in the background. And then obviously a lot of the talk is James Cook, that one lingering. Connor McGovern sort of settling out there as well. The James Cook one, though, is obviously he's been very vocal. So those are all ones to keep an eye on here going forward. But I do expect them to try to get something done with both McGovern and Benford here before the season starts. Hope they can get those done, because I don't want to see either one of those guys hit the free market, because I think if they hit the free market, then I don't think the Bills are affording to bring them back.
I totally agree with that. I think Christian Benford right now is my priority to extend. I think I'm actually comfortable. Despite I do love James Cook, and I think James Cook has been a vital part of this offense, but I am just not in the camp of giving him the money he seeks out. Personally, I just find that with the way this Bills team is constructed, there are running backs you could find that have similar profiles, or even a different one that could still be productive behind this line, and the diversity in their running concepts, and really just the ability to still push the ball down the field in a variety of ways, whether that's with your second or third back, whether that's with Josh Allen. To me, it's of the positions that we have prioritized giving extensions to, the one that I am the least concerned over if we do lose that player. Now, would I like to keep James Cook? I would, for a very reasonable deal. But I do think that it's unlikely at this point, given the discrepancy in what he wants. And it's why I want Christian Benford. I just feel that Christian Benford has proven himself as a viable CB1 on this team, someone who could play man coverage, but also excel in zone coverage. He's just sound in coverage. I mean, when you look at him and have to, on any sort of deep route where he has to track, he never seems he's too far behind. He knows how to time when he needs to break up a pass and get his arms up. There's just so much to like about him in run defense as well. He's the complete package to me as a cornerback for this team. I think he's still ascending as a player in this league. And for that reason, I want to keep him. Do I think he has or will get JC Horn money? I don't think so. But I am really kind of sitting here like, even if it is, like you just alluded to, Aaron, I want him back. I just think Christian Benford's a vital part of this. And there's already questions in the secondary as it is. I want stability. I want to make sure that that spot is fortified so we can build off of it. So if they could get it done now, great. I hope they can, because I really don't want Benford to hit the open market. I don't think we get him back if he does.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone can confirm. I've seen a couple of posts here in the chat that Dane Jackson might be back.
I got to look at this too, because there's refuting. They're saying that Air Raid trolled.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's real. Wait, no, it's not. No, it's not.
I was going to say.
Judge.
God damn it, Judge.
It's from 2023. Why would he do that? That's messed up.
God damn it, Judge. Unbelievable. We're gonna have to deal. I'm gonna have to have HR deal with Steve Mathis.
Greg, if you're watching this, you can't be mad at me. Blame him, not me.
Unbelievable. So no, Dane Jackson is not back. Although I did predict that in the Cover One Discord channel that we were talking, where are they going to land on corners, since they sort of missed out on some of the guys here, which we'll talk about at the end of the episode here. And I did predict that I could see a Dayton Jackson coming back. So that's why it shocked me. Chat, you got to do better. You can't drop news in here if it's just a troll job from Mathis. So we'll take care of Mathis, but you guys need to be better for us here in the chat. A couple other pieces of business, sort of, before we get into some of the new shiny toys, is the Bills were able to sign some of their own here that did hit the market. This was one. We'll start out right at the top with Ty Johnson signing a 2-year deal. We're talking about James Cook perhaps looking for another deal. It's nice to get Ty Johnson back with a 2-year deal, knowing that he'll at least have that 1 year where if they don't decide to keep James Cook for longer, they are going to have Ray Davis and Ty Johnson at the very least under contract while they figure out who is going to be that running back that they draft. So that's a nice one. That was one, Joe, that I did have some concerns that there might be a market for him that put him out of the Bills range, or a team just, that has a little bit of extra money to spend and saw his production behind this line and thought that they could achieve that. I do think this is a better fit for Ty Johnson to come here. I don't think he's one of those players that if he got a little bit more money, a couple million more on the market, I think he would have regretted it. Not his bank account would have regretted it, but in terms of the production and the fit for this team, I think probably matches out better than anywhere else. The Bills were also able to bring back Reggie Gilliam, which is fantastic. We saw what a piece he was in the postseason as football goes into January and you want to get a little bit bigger. They also continue to bring back Darrynton Evans every chance they possibly get. They will bring back Darrynton Evans, so he comes back. And then Damar Hamlin also comes back on a 1-year deal in the safety room. Any thoughts on this group of 4 guys that we know pretty well?
Yeah, I mean, I was very happy to see Ty Johnson come back, but even happier when I saw the details, because 2 years for $5 million, in my opinion, is a steal. And I know he's not running back 1 in that room, but he damn sure came up in very critical moments for this team multiple times this season. But even before the clutch plays, was also just someone who galvanized the offense at times, whether it was that Rams game where he took one to the house, or just the countless examples like the Detroit game where they used him as the primary receiving back down the field. Ty Johnson's importance to this offense was just on display every single week. And if they lost him, I would have understood the direction of maybe we just want to go get a running back that we could have for 4 years, find someone with a similar profile and be able to just work him into that role. Or you just get the sure thing, and they did. And I thought Ty Johnson was going to have a bigger market than what he had, but 2 years, $5 million, continuing to be someone that they can count on to just turn to and be a change of pace back. He has the speed. He has the receiving ability. He has the off-script ability, which I think is really big. It's something that you should always keep in account with players that you want to bring back, is how good is their chemistry with Josh Allen. I think his is tremendous. And also, he might still be, by the end of next season, the best pass blocking running back on the Buffalo Bills. And that goes a very long way when you talk about whether they trying to do pre to post snap? How are they trying to disguise things? Are they actually going to run play action? Is Ty Johnson in the backfield, and is he going to pick up an extra rusher if someone decides to come for them? Like, those are critical things that can keep this offense going and make them more threatening, especially if this receiving core elevates further this year. So I'm very happy to have him back. I really thought it was a no-brainer for the right price, and it was the right price. But otherwise, Reggie Gilliam, I want to see more recruitment in, a little more creativity with him, because I think you can chalk him up a little more in the passing game, and it could be a lot of fun. But I just like him as a run blocker in general, and I think he's been very consistent in that role. And, Damar Hamlin, people treat this man like he's the spawn of Satan. People treat him like he's the worst player on earth. And frankly, it really annoys me, because I think Damar Hamlin is a perfectly fine safety. Do I think he is an all-pro? No. But do I think he is as bad as the narrative around him is? Absolutely not. I think Damar Hamlin is perfect for the room. He has camaraderie with the coaching staff. He's been here. He understands the playbook. And you got him for 1 year with details that haven't even come out, so it is likely a very team-friendly deal. People really need to slow down on their absolute just audacious, ridiculous takes with Damar Hamlin. This guy has been a contributing factor to the defense and has also made some very significant plays for this defense, including that Baltimore game where he not only had the strip on Lamar Jackson, but also the open field tackle on Derrick Henry that stopped a touchdown that people have just conveniently forgot about when they want to say he's bad in run defense or that he's just a bad safety. Damar Hamlin is good for this defense. And if you were talking about elevating your floor, your depth for maybe a draft pick, or maybe you're starting to being Rapp, Bishop, or the new safety that we'll get to, then I'm happy with. And I just feel like there is this really this vitriol towards him that I just don't understand, Aaron. So I'm happy to have him back on a 1-year deal. And I think all of these signings are solid and just all things that can help contribute to next season.
Yeah, I love everything you said. The Damar Hamlin stuff's super weird to me. I've always defended him as adequate, and that's not a bad thing. I don't know that maybe that's not the right word to use because it has a negative connotation. But even Joshua here saying, he's too slow, he's a liability in coverage. I just don't see. I always encourage people to zoom out and look at the league as a whole. And I think when we do that, when we zoom out and look at the league as a whole, one, I think he marks out along with his peers as a starting caliber safety in the league, and having that as potentially your third safety in case a Cole Bishop development isn't what we expect it to be, or in case Taylor Rapp continues to not be able to stay on the field and stay healthy. I think having that third option that knows your defense, that can play starting caliber safety, is a fantastic thing to have. It's in fact great insurance. And the concepts that he's too slow or anything like that, like his RAS score is very similar to what Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer's were. They weren't elite athletes. It was processing that separated them. And I do think that he's fine. I think he's an adequate player with that raises the floor. And that is, to me, what roster building is all about, is making sure that that floor doesn't bottom out at any positions, because we see it year in and year out. Other guys are going to have to step in. How many years have we pulled street free agents for linebackers and cornerbacks and things like that? So the best that you can get, the backups of your team to be raising that floor, is absolutely good GMing, and being able to get him back on a 1-year deal is an advantage to the Buffalo Bills. And I think he's a fit for this defense. And I think really is also at a need in terms of depth at a position that I'm not super comfortable with. We're banking on the development of Cole Bishop, who I love. I love his game. I hope that he develops. And we're banking on Taylor Rapp being able to stay healthy. Those are concerns to me. And we'll talk a little bit more about that safety room here in a little bit as we get into some of the shiny, newer toys here. But before we do, I do want to just make sure we give a shout out to our good friends here at William Attar Law Offices, because I don't have a pump the brakes or a here to help. We will have those segments for you, our good friends at William Attar, here coming up in the next few episodes as we break down these contracts a little bit more and break down how some of this stuff's going to impact. But really, I'll throw it up here on the screen, because really this whole segment is sort of here to help, because they are free agents are here to help the situation. So we'll just leave the here to help. There you go, William Attar. You get a whole half of the show as we do the remaining free agents. I might have to take the graphic down at some point, but our good friends over at William Attar, hurt in a car, call William Attar, 844-444-4444. That is a mouthful of fours. You know who to call. Hurt in a car, call William Attar.
They're fantastic for us.
I love William Attar. I got to go to the Jaguars game with him, the Monday night game. He graciously invited me to come sit in a suite with him and got to meet his family. What a fun, fantastic night. And this offseason, he's a busy guy, but this offseason, I think we're going to get together, hit some wings up and cut some content together. Super down to earth, just like he comes off in his social media and all of his commercials and stuff like that. So let's kind of dig right into this stuff here. I am going to pull down that one and put this one back up. Let's dig right into this. And we're going to go in chronological order of when I saw them signed to the Bills here. We're going to start off with wide receiver Josh Palmer, 25 years old, 6'2", 210, signed a 3-year, $36 million deal. That's $12 million per year. This was a guy that Eric definitely had as a archetype fit for the Bills' need of that kind of X boundary, stretch the field, push the field, give you a deep threat. Limited production in his time in LA. Obviously was behind Keenan Allen and Williams. Didn't really have a chance to break through until this past year. Still had some limited production, but I think his skill set didn't really fit the need that they had specifically. I think they needed a true alpha number one receiver, and he's not that. Where I think he's a good complement to maybe a more full room that the Buffalo Bills have here. And so again, today I was talking with Cody Alexander of Match Quarters and Field Vision. I was on his podcast, and he's a fan of the Broncos, and his co-host is a fan of the Chiefs. So they got to see a lot of Palmer over the past few years being in division. And they also love this fit in terms of one, Field Vision has him as one of the top 10 field stretchers, deep threats that they have. Even though the production isn't there, the EPA on those deep balls and stretching the field is there. And that is exactly what the Bills sort of like. I love this wide receiver room. I love the tight ends. I love the skill positions. I didn't think they needed a whole lot, But if they were going to add, it needed to be a different dynamic. I think they get that with Palmer at 25 years old with a bunch of upside. A lot of people kind of feel like this is an overpay. We haven't seen the exact details of this deal, so it's hard to say it's an overpay. Where are you on Josh Palmer to the Bills?
As far as the contract, I was a little taken back by how much they're giving him, but I also just think the receiver market is broken in general. And I think the Tutu Atwell contract was kind of the red alarm that this is probably going to be your floor for what you're seeing receivers get, at least younger ones with some.
It's going to make that
explosiveness
Shakir
to them.
deal look a lot better in a couple of years.
Another great example of why I love that contract extension and why I'm happy it got done, because look at what this market is. It's a position that was already relatively weak going into free agency. Again, not an indictment on the player, but when you're talking about the top end, it was really the potential of T. Higgins, some vets, and then some more room fillers, or at least guys that could serve your offense. But for Josh Palmer, I'm a fan of him. I think what he can bring to this offense, while it's not necessarily that blazing speed, is just tactical route running, which I think they could use, especially when you look at some of his numbers against man coverage and how he is able to get separation against man coverage. It is a skill set that they did need, and it's something that I think when you look at the context of the Bills wide receiver room, it fills it out nicely. I think there still could be one more type of profile there if they did want to go for a true speed guy, but Josh Palmer is something they didn't particularly have as far as skill set, and I'm very excited to see how that translate into an offense that needs someone like him, because last season they turned to Amari Cooper to be that de facto man beater that could create separation, and he did at times, but with the injury and kind of him being up there in age and not really being as, dynamic as he once was, I would say it didn't truly live up to the billing. Maybe it does if he comes back in a full offseason. We'll have to see. But with Josh Palmer getting a full offseason in this offense and being a guy that we know can have that skill set, is only 25 years old, and is capable of working with Josh Allen to get on the same page with the entire summer behind them, or in front of them, I should say, but behind them when the season starts. That's something that I'm encouraged by. So while I do think the contract might be a little bit on the pricier side, I like Josh Palmer's skill set. I like his game, and I think there's a fit for him. And also, when you talk about some of the other guys in this receiving core, whether that's a rookie they might pick up or if it's Keon Coleman, someone that's been in the league for a couple years, that might help refine Keon Coleman's game too, and maybe free him a little bit more in this offense. And one of those situations where he is the rising tide that might lift a boat or two, because I don't expect him to lift all boats, because I don't think he's going to be that alpha X, but rather just a contributor.
Yeah, I think the contract's going to come up time and time again, because I don't know that I see him coming in with an overwhelming amount of production. I think this is still going to be, as Mina Kimes likes to put, a target agnostic offense where certain guys eat on certain days, and you might have a Keon Coleman week. I think Khalil Shakir will stay consistent. I see Darrynton Kincaid continuing to rise up. So this is going to be a tough place in terms of the traditional ways that we associate value to these contracts and production. But Josh Palmer also does a lot of what Matt Collins did in terms of being a guy that can get in there and block. He's a bigger body. But he provides that different dynamic of being able to stretch the field. And I think there's value in stretching the field, even if it isn't associated to production, right? I argue all the time, Joe, that those deep shots, those 15, 20 plus air yard throws, is not efficient football. It's low probability plays. So even if you are getting better at them, this is still something that you're going to hit inconsistently. You don't see a lot of those throws in a game. You might get one or two of those types of plays in a game, but that ability to stress a defensive coordinator, to not allow a defense to kind of condense the field and keep everything in front of them and have to respect that deep threat. It's a benefit in and of itself. We talk about that with like elite wide receivers and the gravity that they pull, right? Having a different guy that presents that option just so the defense have to respect it is going to open up some things for Darrynton Kincaid in the middle of the seam, also being able to stretch that seam. I think Khalil Shakir can do a lot of that. I said earlier how a lot of people that I talk to think of him as kind of that he's not a poor man's anymore, but a poor man's Equanimous St. Brown, where he can sort of or St. Brown, where he can sort of stretch the field and do some of that stuff and really attack the seams. Having somebody that can do that on the boundary opens a lot of that up for you. And then the underneath stuff, where with the Ty Johnson, with the James Cook, being able to pull the defense deeper doesn't allow them to consolidate the field. So I think there's going to be ways that he adds production to maybe other players, but that contract's going to continue to be something that people point out. Well, he's not a 800 plus yard receiver, and he's not getting X amount of targets. And it was a huge overpay and a big miss by Bean. But I think that his added value to this team could come in ways that we don't see in the box score, I guess is what I'm trying to say there.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Let's move on to another former resident of LA, and also Canadian, a couple of Canadians here. Josh Palmer coming from Ontario, and we are also going with Michael Hoecht. Again, another guy that was on Eric's top 7 of Bill's targets. He loved him. I honestly, I didn't really know much about his game until I saw him pop up on Eric's list. And then I went and dug before. And when I saw him sign, I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Eric's always pretty much right about this stuff. But 27 years old, 6'4", playing at, we heard Eric talk, he was playing at like 267, I think was his playing weight, but at one point was up over 300 pounds, that's a crazy transformation, by the way, to like be able to transform from 310 to 267 and play crazy. There is fantastic. He signs a 3-year deal, 3-year, 21 million. Spot Track had it at 7 per. This is a super intriguing one to me, Joe, because it's not necessarily the traditional archetype that the Bills have gone over. Eric saw the play and saw him as a fit in terms of the type of play, but this is a guy where obviously when we talk about the guy they signed next, there's a lot of fun pieces you can move around with a Greg Rousseau, with a Joey Bosa, with a Hoecht. And I think that this move specifically was an indicator of they want to stay in nickel. And I think more so in this last year, teams push them to maybe want to get out of nickel because they were smaller in that front 7 and they did get bullied around at moments, whether it was the interior defensive line not being able to penetrate and get upfield, but also some of those, I love Vaughn, but he was on a limited snap count throughout the year and wasn't really helping in the run game, but you had some smaller edge players that were kind of getting pushed around the run game. If you're going to stay in nickel and you're going to do the things that the Bills want to do, you got to get guys that are 6'4", 267 and can move inside and outside and play the run like Michael Hoecht can do. And so I love this move chess piece that's also prioritizes run defense along that defensive line.
Yeah, he is a lot of fun looking into him a bit further because of the fact that when you think of how much the team does value someone who is truly positionless, you really couldn't find anyone on the market that was more positionless than Michael Hoecht. I mean, even looking at his snaps, even though it's primarily D-line, quote unquote, there's some box snaps. He has 79 there. My favorite is there's 33 slot corner snaps by technicality. And then you think of that DK Metcalf rep and you're like, dude, this is awesome. I made a joke in our Discord where I was like, tired the backup slot corner is Cam Lewis and wired or inspired as Michael Hoecht is the backup slot corner. But Michael Hoecht is a really fun, I would call it, experiment for this Bills defense that seems to be trending in at least newer directions. I don't want to say new because they're going to run a lot of the same, concepts that they've been running, same base nickel that they've been running. But, sprinkle in some new looks, sprinkle in some more man, whether they'd go for more single high rates and more man coverage rates altogether. But why I like Michael Hoecht is because it seems that with the versatility he's bringing, he also brings just a really aggressive approach to playing. And with that, makes him a threat at many different positions, whether it's out on the edge and run defense or as a pass rusher, or even on the interior if you wanted to make him a de facto 3-tech, because he had mentioned, and just to throw the plug here for Eric and Ant's, eventual sit-down episode that's going to come out with
tomorrow
them.
Night,
tomorrow night. He played 3-tech coming into the NFL, so he has a lot of experience there. He is a well-rounded player that can wear a lot of hats, but in turn gives you a lot of creativity as a DC to throw many looks at an offense. And now pairing him with who we're eventually going to get to on this list, the big ticket item, I think that makes this D line a lot more dangerous, because while you're already worrying about the big ticket as their pass rush specialist and Greg Rousseau, who we know eats when there's a lot of help and support, and Ed Oliver in the interior, if you have a situation where maybe you run an odd front or maybe you have 5 rushing and Michael Hoyt's one of these guys in addition to your other pass rushers, I think there's a lot of potential there to be a really fun thing and a really productive D-line, especially if you implement some picks in the draft that might have pass rush prowess as well. So for me, I've been making it a point that my free agency philosophy for the Bills with the limited cap space they had was to elevate the floor any way you can. I don't think there's another player besides the guy we're going to get to that elevates it more than Michael Hoecht will for this Bills defense, just because of the versatility you're going to get with him, how you could build off that versatility, and the fact that he is actually threatening as a pass rusher wherever you align him and as a run defender too.
Yeah, I love the idea of third and long, and it's Greg Rousseau, Ed Oliver. You slide Hoyt kind of on the inside, and you have a Joey Bosa lining up, and you let these big dudes. I mean, that's a big group of pass rushers too. Just come out, rush, get limbs up, compress the pocket. I think there's a lot of things you can do, a lot of stunts, a lot of games that you can play, and I like the direction in the vision that I see for them. Let's get right into it. Then we hear that the Bills do sign Joey Bosa, 29, who will be 30 this year, years old, 6'5", 280 pounds. Again, size getting bigger. If you're going to play nickel, this is how you continue to do it. You increase your size, you increase your size of the players that you're playing in nickel, so you don't have to get out of that base defense. They signed him to a 1-year, $12.6 million deal. This one, though, I will say I was a little kind of like, nah, like there's a lot of injury history here over the last 3-4 years. The production hasn't been at the elite level. And my concern on this one, Joe, was the name, I think, associates more of a reaction than we've seen from the player in recent years. And while he's still productive when he's healthy, and he still has a good pass rush win rate, and he's at an okay pass rush productivity. For me, actually, what stood out, so last night I watched every single pass rush snap of his, and then this morning I watched every single running snap of his, and I actually was more intrigued by the run defense than I was necessarily by the pass defense, and the pass rush. The pass rush is there. I think he can be a 8 to 10 sack guy still in the NFL. I think he's a little limited. It's more speed to power type stuff. He's not going to be that bendy edge defender that I think a lot of people are looking for, but he's still got power. He wins with power. He thrives in that stunt game, which I think will play nice with Hoyt, will play nice with Ned Oliver. So there's definitely ways to win in that sense. But I think this again was the Bills trying to have a concerted effort of, we want to stay in nickel and we want to play some too high stuff like that. That's the bread and butter of a Sean McDermott defense. In order to do that, they had to get bigger and they had to get stronger in the run game. And I think Joey Bosa does that. I think he's an improvement. That's probably where we'll see the biggest improvement in the starting defensive line is Joey Bosa as the run defender, where I think everybody's just seeing sacks and sacks on Patrick Mahomes and stuff like that. I actually think the run defense is where the Bills benefit the most from this move.
So that's interesting because I'm actually kind of on the opposite end of the fence as far as what his role will be in this defense. Now, I'm going into this in a similar mindset. I'm like whelmed, cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously optimistic because I do believe in the pass rush prowess of Joey Bosa if he stays healthy. But I think such consistent injuries have been the factor into maybe lost steps in his explosiveness and maybe the speed not particularly being there. But there are still those flashes from last season that maybe say this guy can get it done if you allow him, the ability to recover fully, if you give him the chance to, rush without having too much on his plate, which is why I've kind of subscribed to the idea of him actually being more of a true pass rush specialist in this defense. And maybe not to say he won't do any run defense at all, because that's unrealistic. Of course, he's going to be out in the field. They had the corpse of Von Miller running it this past season. But with Joey Bosa, I think you are going to see him in that role, but more limited to just a pass rush specialist more of the time. And I can live in that world and I'm comfortable in that world because I think that's the best thing if you're talking about trying to increase the longevity of Joey Bosa, not just for this season, but if it is good enough for a longer term, if you decide to ever bring him back, or even if there's care about his value on the open market next season. So I would prefer to limit the amount of run defense snaps he is going to get relative to what we typically have edge rushers do. And I'm hoping that whether that's addressing it in the draft or in a future free agency signing, they can do that, because I think they would also benefit from living in a world where, I almost said my stupid tagline, where Joey Bosa is just able to rush the passer, and that's what you can limit him to, just because that's going to keep a little less tread on the tires, and therefore you could still get that productivity and still have the threat of him. And really, to me, you can also live in that world if you tighten up your early down defense, because I think a big problem for this defense this past season was their ability to just get gashed in the quick game and how it kind of rendered their pass rush ineffective at times, until there were points where the pass rush did have an opportunity, but it was limited. And now you just don't have that. You don't have that juice you did. I want to see them get better there, because I also think a signing like Joey Bosa becomes more impactful if you tighten that up, which I think the Bills are working to make a priority this offseason in addition to the D-line additions. So I'm cautiously optimistic about it. I didn't, jump around or cheer or get all amped up, but I see the vision. I think it could be a good signing for them, and I hope it does work out, because they need the pass rush, man. It is long overdue to find some formidable pass rushers that stick around.
Yeah, the thing that is such a weird one for me was how we play the optics game of some of these guys, right? So, like, for instance, I don't want to get off at the tangent here. You have Joey Bosa, who, when I saw the name in free agency, I didn't put him on my list because I assumed that the name would draw a little bit more money and interest, and that you wouldn't be able to fit him into the Bills just because of the name alone. But then I want to compare him to some of the, I had Chase Young as a guy that was a target for me, and people were like, "Oh, gross! Chase Young sucks. We don't want him." And then everyone was like, "No, you want Josh Sweat. He's nasty. He's awesome." And then Joey Bosa is kind of like in the middle, which is probably the Goldilocks, right? Like situation for the Bills here. But to me, like, productivity wise, they're all kind of the same, right? But it's just the optics that are different. Chase Young hasn't lived up to his draft stock. He hasn't hit those elite levels yet, but he's been solid, and he's been right there with what Joey Bosa has done over the last couple of years. And Josh Sweat had a really good Super Bowl, but he hasn't been like crazy productive. He's right kind of in line with these other guys, but the optics on the three of these dudes couldn't be any different. Like, if the Bills signed Young, people would have been like, "Oh, this is dumb. Bean sucks. He doesn't want to win." But it's Bosa, and they're like, "Oh, well, he's a beast when he is healthy. Like, this could be really great." And so the optics to me are so funny, in how we kind of tuck ourselves into narratives surrounding a player, when I think all three were probably clumped in to a similar area. They'll all be paid differently. But I think they're in terms of their production is very similar. I don't disagree with your point that I do think he'll be prioritized in some of those past situations, those known passing downs. But I don't see this as being like a Von Miller 23% of snaps type of thing. I think he will be part of the rotation and continuing that theme of trying to be bigger. I think Hoecht will also be a big part of that rotation on the early downs. But I could see Bosa being a 40%, 45% snap type of guy, where he's in and involved in the run game as well. I like it. I think that it adds to the size that they're trying to get. And I hope that he plays well enough to go secure a contract next year and get himself another big contract, not with the Buffalo Bills, and that he meets the expectations that a lot of people associate to his name. Again, once I turned on the film, I saw a guy that is still winning with power, is still, even when he doesn't get the pass rush win, is still collapsing the pocket and causing issues for a quarterback. And so I definitely sold more into it once I turned on the film. But it was a weird night for me of kind of being like, man, I don't know. The name's a little heavy. I'm not sure. And then kind of sold myself into, yeah, this guy's probably lost a step. I definitely have concerns about his ability to stay available. But if he can, I think that, with some of the other moves that they've made and the development of Greg Rousseau, I hope that they're not done here and getting in another one tech along this defensive line. But I do think they're building out a nice defensive rotation here, with Joey Bosa being a pretty key piece of it for 2025. And Greg, I wasn't calling you out specifically. I love you, honey. I know you get excited. I can't make him not love Joey Bosa, but I'm not trying to make anyone not love him. I just want to frame the proper expectations so that we're not screaming on the post-game shows when he's not a 12, 15 sack guy, and that he's just part of a really solid rotation for the Bills that allows them to be bigger and stay in nickel.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. And I think tempering the expectations is fair for a 30-year-old vet on a 1-year deal, more importantly, because that contract should tell you everything about the expectations for Joey Bosa, right? Not to say he couldn't find old form, stay healthy, and get, 13 sacks in a season, but he's a bit longer in the tooth now. And it's the reality of he is a 30-year-old edge rusher who has not been able to stay healthy, and he has to prove he can in order to secure, a longer term contract that gets you a few years. So I'm comfortable with the move. I definitely am not expecting anything crazy as much as I'm happy about it. Like, I'm good with it, with room to be like ecstatic if it ends up panning out. And, if he exceeds 40%, plays 60%, whatever it may be, and he does well, I'm not going to complain. It's more just with someone like his profile and his history, I'm just tempering the expectations that they're going to ask him to do a lot, at least immediately, because maybe they implement him as a pass rush specialist that kind of develops into a bigger role as he gets more comfortable in this defense. Maybe they keep it the same. There is flexibility there, though, and that's a good thing for this Bills defense that, again, just needs the pressure, needs the bodies, and can hopefully fortify it this year.
Yeah, hold on. I'm pulling something up here because I got to fight one of our commenters here. It's all right.
The Chase Young is garbage one?
The Chase Young is garbage here, one
all
by Coach. He says, so Joey Bosa had a 6.9 PRP, which is pass rush productivity, which is fine. That's right there stat, with your yeah, it's a great stat. So this is pass rush productivity combines pressures, hits, sacks, all those things in relation to how often you are rushing the passer. So it's a really good stat for maybe some guys like a Von Miller last year, who was only playing 23% of the time, but they were all pass rush, right? And so he had a really high PRP. Mm-hmm. So Bosa's was 6.9%, which was good for 70 something. I'm looking it up right now. It was good for it was in the 70s.
I'm trying to find it right now with you. I'm on the spreadsheet.
Nick is at 13. Joey was 72nd. And then let's see, Chase Young was 35th at 8.1 pass rush productivity. So again, this is just like the optics of how we talk about players and what our expectations of them were versus what they are. So when you say right here, Coach Chapman, not calling you out, but I am, that Chase Young is garbage. One, I absolutely hate talking about players and calling them trash or garbage. These are NFL players. Like, none of these guys, if you're playing any substantial amount, you're not garbage. Best season is 7.5 sacks. Again, sacks is something that we got to kind of change the narrative of how we talk about success for edges based on sacks. He's still getting 7-8 sacks a year, but his pressure is there. The pressure numbers continue to be good. I think they're similar guys, to be honest. And New Orleans had to pay Chase Young more to stay in New Orleans than the Bills had to pay Joey Bosa. Again, I don't want to get off on this rant, but it's crazy to me how we have these narratives and we talk about these guys. Chase Young's a good football player. So if you're excited about Joey Bosa, you should probably also think Chase Young is good at football too. Because they're both. Yeah, go ahead.
And I was just going to say, like, this is kind of what I was talking about before with the Damar Hamlin narrative. Like, it can't be a gray area. It can't be a middle ground. We got to say they're trash because, they only had 7 sacks, or, he only had 2 interceptions. Like, it's just so much more nuanced than that. And it's just when you hear one sentiment shared on the Evil app, it just gets to a degree where people, and I'm not trying to call that person out specifically in our chat, but rather just speaking on the discourse in general, it gets parroted to a fault. And we just run with this idea that a player is bad until they're proven otherwise. And that otherwise is something super unattainable. Like, Damar Hamlin in the eyes of the fan base would be, I guess, like, redeemed if he literally had an all-pro season. And I'm not expecting that out of him, but I don't think he's trash or bad. And it's like with Chase Young was a productive edge rusher. And yeah, he was a first-round pick. He was very highly touted coming out of college, and he had an ACL injury that was a freak thing that might have slowed him down a bit, but he's still very productive. And that's a world you can live in as a player in the NFL. And it's why these extremes that we go to are just not a fair representation of a player, but not good for discourse about the sport, really any sport in general.
Yeah. TP asking the real question here, and what we need, Greg, is how are the Saints literally paying anyone? Like, how can they field a football team? I don't know. It's Mickey Loomis is not good at his job, but continues to just find ways to pay people more money. None of it makes sense, and we can't make it make sense. And I don't even know that Greg could make it make sense for me.
That can has so many footprints in it. That can is crumpled and it's in a dumpster and out of the dumpster. That can is 10 miles down the road, man. I don't know either. I really don't know either.
It's good on Brady, Joe Brady, for not taking that job. What a tough job to get yourself into. But let's continue along. We got a couple more here to get to before we get out of here tonight. The Bills, after signing Joey Bosa, which we both really like and can't wait to see how that plays out here this year. Larry Ogunjobi is their next signing. And this one actually was, again, when they signed him, 30 years old, 6'3", 305. They signed him to a 1-year deal, $8.3 million. I was kind of, I don't know how I feel. He wasn't necessarily on my radar for filling that interior defensive line spot. More of a 3-tech, which I was really looking for that 1-tech, that role to kind of maybe replace Daquan Jones or at least supplement Daquan Jones. To me, this is almost a little bit of an indictment against Dwayne Carter. Potentially here as we go forward, because I just don't see a scenario where I know they like to rotate. I know there's going to be a heavy rotation. This is a kind of Dwayne Carter. You got to earn your spot on this roster this year, and he should. He flashed kind of a little bit early on, but it wasn't great, and there was a lot more bad than good, and it never got better when he came back from the injury. And so what I didn't want to see this year was the Bills having to reach back into the tank and get another run out of Jordan Phillips. I know Jordan Phillips is a big time fan. Like, there's a lot of fans of Jordan Phillips and a lot of people stand for him. I don't think he's a very good player. I think that he is more of a vulnerability than he is a positive on the interior. I didn't want to go back into the pulling out 33-year-old Quentin Jeffersons or 30-something-year-old guys that late in the season you still haven't addressed this position in this rotation, and so you're kind of just reaching into the bag of old tricks that you've had in the past. I don't want to be in that position again, so I think that this move here now allows you to address that, and $8 million of this is guaranteed. He's on this team this year. He's going to be a part of the rotation. And then when I turned on the tape, Joe, I saw all the stuff that people really like about Jordan Phillips is here in spades with Ogunjobi. And I think that he was a little bit out of position in Pittsburgh and playing in a 3-4 and having to play a little bit more out wide. He's going to be probably not used in that same way here in Buffalo. I think you can look back more at Cincinnati and his time in Cleveland for some of what he could do for this Bills team. And what I saw, though, is that the things that people like about Phillips is when he does win, it's explosive and it's upfield. It's just super inconsistent. And I think Ogunjobi has some inconsistency in his game. He does lose leverage at times. He loses reps. He doesn't take on the double teams. He's not a 1-tech. He's not like a guy that's just going to be stout and hold up against those types of things in the run game. But dude, when this guy wins, he wins with an explosion. He doesn't miss the tackle when he wins. He creates some havoc. And I think that's a nice rotational piece along Ed Oliver in this interior. What are you looking at for him here in the interior defensive line? What'd you see?
So, I mean, he felt like the direct replacement for Jordan Phillips. I mean, when you talk about his experience and his age and what he's really specializing in, it's his ability to create disruption and create force, whether he's on the interior as a 3-tech and penetrating from that position, or if he does go into that de facto 1-tech role, which you've seen the Bills do with some of their rotational guys like Jordan Phillips, which please never again. I hope Larry Ogunjobi does a better job if they do have him sit in 1-tech. I know someone said it in the comments, and it's known that back in, his Bengals days and earlier on in his career, he did have nose tackle experience and he was able to man that. So that is important. And I do like that he has that experience. But for me, I'm a little more in tune with it or supportive of it if he is that rotational 3-tech. And I know that, the Bills will ask him to take on a different role or line up from a different side because that's just what they do with their DTs. But I think where the money is going to be made and you're going to get your return on investment is having, a stabilizing force of pressure for Ed Oliver to come off, something that I wanted to see from Carter in his rookie year that we didn't get, but that I think you can get from Ogunjobi is if you do have to have Ed come off the field for whatever reason, I don't think you lose the disruption. I don't think you lose the pressure. What I think you get is consistency where the depth is not supplying you with the drop off and the floor of your pass rush is a lot higher from that position. But I don't think at the same time, and maybe it's my homerism because I was such a huge fan of him, but realistically, for his second year, it's an indictment on Dwayne Carter, because I do think that Dwayne Carter could just be at the bottom of the room to start, with room to kind of look upward, but more so Ogunjobi just being someone that kind of slides between the two positions. If they do ask him to go for a nose tackle or one tech role, if the same thing would have to happen with Daquan Jones where he comes off the field, and then you just have him kind of find his identity somewhere in the depth, and maybe he gets better, maybe he doesn't, but I just hope, Aaron, this is not all they do, and I don't think it's all they do, but I hope like someone like Ogunjobi and maybe one more free agent is not all they do. I need a true one tech to inherit Daquan Jones' spot. Not saying it has to be the typical archetype. I'm not saying the dude has to be Michael Pierce size, but just someone who is capable of anchoring, has gap integrity, and generating disruption and pressure. It is just, when you talked earlier about what the Bills want and how they can win and stay in nickel, to me, that's the piece. And you look at some of these defenses around the league and the one techs that have really thrived and have those traits. That's really where the money is made for these defenses, is the ability to win with four, because you're generating so much disruption from a four-man front. I think that they need to find that, and that's how they can truly evolve into an unstoppable defense with a player like that. And I'm just hoping that the patchwork nature of how they've addressed this position, not saying they haven't tried in the draft at all, obviously, but the patchwork nature of who they've leaned on isn't what they do this season, and they can find one, because it is a vital need and something that I just really want to see the team have for years to come. Just to throw one for Greg Thompson before I turn it back to you. Team Mass, baby. Let's go. Team Mass.
Yeah, where's Star Latule when you need him? Am I right?
Yeah.
No, nobody's taking on that one. All right, we'll move to our last free agent acquisition. Then we will get into sort of some guys that are out there remaining and some holes and stuff like that. But Dark Forest, safety, 25 years old, will be 29 this year, or 26 this year. You can't go from 25 to 29. That is not how time works. He will be 26 this year, 5'11", 200 pounds, a 9.68 relative athletic score, 4.42 40-yard dash. So this, I'm going to be in full transparency. I spent so much time looking at Joey Bosa. I spent so much time looking at Ogunjobi. I did a very surface level dive into Forest here. I plan to, as soon as we get off here tonight, I am going to go dig into the film a little bit deeper. I just haven't had time. I don't want to come out here and tell you I know who this guy is and exactly what he's going to be. But on the surface level, I like this signing. It's a 1-year deal. You're getting another guy to come in here and compete. Played a lot of special teams reps. It seems like everything that I've seen and the Commanders guys that I've talked to, it was more just a transition of coaching staff, a little bit of injury mixed in here that has kind of taken the development and the way he was trending and put it down to the side a little bit and kind of decreased his value on that team. It is not necessarily anything that he did, was just kind of a transition to a new staff. They didn't have the vision for him as a safety, brought in other safeties that kind of curbed his development, and obviously some injuries too. But the athleticism's there, which is something that the Bills, even going back to the Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde days, I think people think of those guys as elite athletes. Go look at their relative athletic scores. The Bills have not prioritized athletes in this secondary. Even Taylor Rapp a little bit more than like your Damar Hamlin. Damar Hamlin's more in the prototypical of a Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde. But then you went last year and you got Cole Bishop, freak athlete, really nice RAS card. And now you have Forrest. And so I can see where fans are going to be like, man, if this guy can hit that potential, we could have everything we've ever wanted in the safety position, and two guys that can fly around, get to the ball, both hard hitters. So I do see the vision. That does excite me. I am going to try to go into the tape here tonight and see if I can really see the vision here. But even on the surface level, even if this is just a guy that could come in and be a special teams, the Bills have lost a lot of that over the last few years. Yeah. You lost a lot of it with Mac Hollins leaving the building here this last year. So even at the floor of this being, he's kind of maybe your new Cam Lewis, where he's a hybrid move type defensive back who can be a special teams contributor. That's a win in free agency in my view. And if he can be more than that and potentially develop into a safety that could potentially hit his ceiling, even better. But yeah, again, I got a lot of work to do on Forrest here, and I'm looking forward to diving into that a little bit more tonight.
For sure. I'm in the same boat as you. I really didn't know much about him. He wasn't on my radar at all, but just in the little I was able to look into, I am a fan of the tenacity he plays with and how hard he can hit. And I think when you talk about this defense in that transitional phase to trying to get maybe heavier, maybe more aggressive, and maybe meaner in general, that is the type of player that you want, especially paired with that athleticism. I'm excited to watch more of him, but even if it's nothing more than just special teams contributions, I mean, it's a 1 year, $1.3 million deal. It's the lowest possible risk you could take. And at best, you get a guy that translates well with his athleticism, maybe does have the processing ability. Maybe the regime does take the flyer on him to give him more of a meaningful role and the ability to contribute in this defense. And maybe you got yourself a steal. You know, there was a lot of love for him just based on what I'm reading about him coming out of college. And I'm more than willing to offer a lot of freak athletic guys $1.3 million to come play for the team and just see what happens. So, you know, you can't lose with this. If it doesn't pan out, he's gone, so be it. And if it pans out, I mean, Brandon Beane, you got yourself another value deal. So we'll just have to see. And I'm looking forward to looking into it.
Yeah. And if there's a position that I trust this Bills staff explicitly with to develop, it's safety. And this it's not crazy. Like normally I would come on here and make fun of fans that are like, oh, he could be a starter. He did start, right? He played 800 snaps in 2022 again here. So, and then another 300 in 2023. But that 2022 season was a good season for him. And I think that when you talk to the people in the Commanders, they saw him trending in the right direction beyond that. And then obviously that was until this last year, a pretty dysfunctional organization that went through a huge regime change. And he sort of seemed to get lost in the shuffle of that regime change. And so, again, if there's a staff and a defense that I trust to get the most out of a guy like this, it is this Bills organization. So I'm not going to dunk and kind of pump my typical approach is to pump the brakes on people that be like, oh, this could be a starter at safety. I don't know. I'm going to watch with an open mind. And if there's a spot on this team where you could take a guy that I didn't know a whole lot about before today and take that type of athleticism and some experience and turn it into a starting caliber safety long term, it's right here in Buffalo. Like that's not a crazy story that you could talk me into. So definitely one of the more exciting free agents for me to get in because I think there is potential. You see the athleticism. He is very young. It could be a thing. And so that's always fun to look at. And at least makes for a fun something to root for this summer and sort of a job there in that safety room now where you got a couple of guys. Again, I said earlier, I don't feel comfortable in the starting safeties for the Buffalo Bills going into the season. And so to me, there is a window open for somebody to come in and take a job. That could be a big opportunity for Forrest here this summer if he hits the ground running with this team. And so on that note, Joe, we still got a couple of holes for this Buffalo Bills team. So we are we're still within sort of the first wave. I think we're hitting into here the second wave of free agency as we get into tomorrow. A lot of the big names are gone, but there's still some starting caliber talent out there. Is there anyone? Obviously, for me, the holes remaining are that one tech would be nice to get somebody there. And then cornerback too, sitting there as a whole. And not that Kyrie Elam was going to be that guy, but he's definitely not now. You only have a few corners on contract. Rasul Douglas is a free agent. So is there any guys that kind of are the apple of your eye here as we head into the second wave?
Right. As far as apple of my eye goes, there's just one, and it's Asante Samuel Jr. And I really don't know how realistic it is. And I don't know if the price of the contract will go down because of the injury. And I know he's not the best tackler in the world, but to me, he seems like at this point in the game with how thin free agency has really gotten at that position, a no-brainer if you're looking to just get an instant plug-and-play CB2. He's someone who I think can really aid you in man coverage. I think he has great ball skills and instincts. And I think he's the type of person when you think about how Rasul Douglas kind of endeared himself to this defense by being able to jump routes and be very good at predicting and good at reading and reacting. You can get that from Samuel Jr. too. And maybe the fact of those injuries does bring him to a point where the price is reasonable for Beane to go for. And you do get him for an extended period of time because he is only 26 years old, I believe. So he's a younger player, someone that can fill that role, someone that can be a mainstay while you also still find someone in the draft that you could either develop behind him or maybe even take his place and have him become a rotational. But that's really the only apple of my eye player right now, because right now I think we've reached that point where it's just filling in depth as best as you can. And there isn't anyone who I would look at this point and be hyped over, but rather just like a shrug your shoulders and say, you know what? Sure. Like, let's go there. But I will say too, like, I'm just going to keep hammering my point. One tech in the draft, please. I'm begging you, Brandon. That's where my like all my energy is focusing on that already, which probably isn't good because we just started free agency. But like when I think of roster construction, when I think of like what I really think will take them over the edge, that's where I go with it. So Asante Samuel Jr. or even maybe a savvy vet at corner. Like I wouldn't hate Trey White coming back on a reasonable deal to be a 4 cornerback, not CB2 maybe, but like a CB3. I wouldn't even hate Dane Jackson on reasonable money. I know that take has gotten people killed on the app, but really at this point, floor raising and functional. And if you can go and get Asante Samuel Jr. to be your primary CB2, I'm much more comfortable going into the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, I think Asante Samuel Jr.'s value is going down here as free agency looms, and he hasn't ended up. You see, Greg and I often talk about the game of musical chairs, and whoever loses that and giving those guys a contract. So I would be happy to give him the contract for losing the musical chairs here this offseason in free agency and let him do even a 1-year prove it deal, prove you're healthy, prove that you are worth a really good contract and go on and we can get that comp pick. Fantastic. I would love that kind of relationship with Asante Samuel Jr. I had Stephon Gilmore as a target early in this process. I would bring him back on a 1-year insurance deal. I actually think he still plays at a pretty good level. He's aged out. And so I think the age will scare people, but this dude's a baller. He never got the respect that he deserved here in Buffalo, and he still plays at a really nice level. Last year was a little weird. I think that Flores defense with the aging out and losing some athleticism probably put him in some not great positions to be. So the stats don't look good. See, Titan giving me, he never gets to come back here, man. Stephon Gilmore didn't do anything wrong to us. He was the best player on a really bad team for a while and wanted to go be good somewhere. I don't blame Stephon Gilmore for wanting the spotlight on him, for wanting to be good and wanting to be on a good team. This was all our fault. This was the fault of mismanagement of an organization for 2 decades. So I'm not going to blame Stephon Gilmore for that. Anyways, I like him. I like Dane Jackson. I thought he was a good player here. I think that's a scheme fit. That's an easy plug in. He knows the language. He knows what he's supposed to do. He went and got money in a not great scheme fit and found out that that's not always the answer to go take the money and play for Carolina. Shaq Griffin would be another one. Honestly, I'd welcome Rasul Douglas back on a really cheap deal if you really miss out on all this other stuff. Right. I know there were some issues with Rasul last year, but again, knows the scheme, knows the fit. It wouldn't prevent you from still going and getting somebody else. But really the answer for me is Trey Amos at 30. I know you're saying 1 tech in the draft, but I'm looking at cornerback too.
I love Trey Amos. Don't worry. I'm a huge fan.
You pair him with Christian Benford and some of the stuff that they got on this front 7, and I the visions that gives me really excites me as we head into the draft season there. But one last one I want to leave you with: not a lot of happening on the interior defensive line remaining in defense or in free agency here, but a guy that has been on my wish list, I think 3 times now in free agency, and still sitting out there is Derek Nottie. And I think that would solve a lot of your answers in terms of insurance, of get him on a 1-year deal. He's been kind of doing that with the Kansas City Chiefs the last few years, just doing 1-year deals. He's 28 years old. He's not the player he used to be, but that size doesn't go away. And those big dudes age pretty well. I would add him into this interior defensive line rotation tomorrow and feel really good about it.
I'm definitely not opposed. And when I say I'm not over the moon, it doesn't mean I wouldn't be happy if they did find that insurance. I know there's been a few people mentioned like on the film room list that Eric and Ann put out and that people have floated around, like Jerry Tillery or
Tillery's another one.
Yeah, those guys being like fortifiers, like good run defenders, just functional pieces. And that's fine by me. It's really more so like if you ask me who I actually want on free agency, like who I'm actually like keen for, it would be ASJ, or honestly, I've been kind of beating the same drum about Gilmore for the past couple seasons, and I think it's so fun just because, one, I do really still like the player. I do still think he can cover in man, and he's not going to just primarily be this washed old zone corner, but also because it's kind of funny to suggest his name and see people get really pissed off.
People hate him.
It's just like, people really don't like Stephon Gilmore, but those are the players I like. But I'm definitely not opposed to someone like Noddy or one of the savvy vets. Again, anything to improve the run defense, the interior of this defensive line is okay with me. I guess I'm just a bit more like, there's a lot of players that could wear the same hat and probably give you similar results.
Yeah. Noddy to me would be like hey, we're not going to be a lot of guaranteed money, and we might draft a replacement for you immediately here in the draft and send you packing this summer, but it's insurance. And I think Brandon Beane wants some insurance before he heads into the draft, so he doesn't feel like he has to do it and he has to get up and take those players, and he can really take best player available, especially with the plethora of picks that they've acquired here, whether it's comp picks and getting the pick from Elam. I expect them to have a little bit of ability to move around and get the things that they want in this draft, and so I think he fills these holes here over the next couple of days, and when he does, we'll have you covered. We'll be back. Greg will be back here next week. Sorry, Joe, you have filled in admirably, but I do want my partner back. I do miss him. He's a handsome guy. He's a nice guy. So he will be back next week as we break down the second wave of free agency for you guys here Wednesday night. As always, Cover One Buffalo podcast. But Joe, could you tell the fine people what you have coming up here over the next couple of weeks?
Absolutely. Under Review is going strong every Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You could find me and a guest of my choice discussing a new topic in the Bills world. We're getting closer to draft season, and I'm gearing up to do a few shows revolving around that, whether it's just position preview and what's really needed, as well as some mock drafts in the future, because I know everybody loves those, but I absolutely love those, and you're all going to do one with me. But next week, I'm going to be in a similar boat, just going over free agency further to see if there's any major news, maybe pivot from there if not. But Aaron, I appreciate you, man. This was a ton of fun. I'm honored to be on the show with you, being the de facto Greg, even though no one could actually ever be Greg Tomset, but
big shoes.
A big shoes. And I appreciate it. This was a lot of fun. I'm encouraged by a lot of the moves the Bills have made. I think that they are elevating that floor, but there's work to be done. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next. But yeah, that's me, Joey DeBosa, every Tuesday night. Catch me.
That's it. Love the name.
Wait, one more thing, AQ. I am so sorry. I'm not used to saying it live also. I'm also helping Eric and Ant and producing the film room with them, so be sure to check them out as well. They're doing a lot of really fun work. I just did a sit down with Michael Hoecht that you can catch tomorrow. It's a really fun time on that show, a great time to be a part of this network, and a great time to check our content out as well. So check it out. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, definitely want to check that one out tomorrow. All the guys are grinding really hard here for you. I watched the great Air Raid Hour on Monday night. Everybody's doing their best to get you the content. So make sure if you're here on YouTube, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, all those things. Guys, it really does help. It helps the algorithm. It helps us get views. We are a truly independent network. This is something that we have built from the ground up here. We aren't backed by some big conglomerate media company. This is all driven by you, the viewers, and your likes and your views and sharing this stuff. That is what keeps us going. The ads on YouTube from you guys watching, that keeps this network going. And if you want to participate a little bit more, I know a lot of people ask how they can help. Joining our Cover One premium membership, you can go to cover1.net/OnePass. Become a One Pass insider. It's a great community that we've built. It gets you access to our Discord channel where Eric's posting film in there. We're breaking things down before we put it live. A lot of the stuff that we don't even put the content out to the public goes into the Discord. And it's just a great community that we've built there. And so again, we are an independent network. We want to remain an independent network and give you guys this kind of content. In order to do that, we need your support, whether that's a like here on this video, sharing with a friend, however you can. It means the world to us, guys. We see the support, the comments and all that stuff, and it really keeps us going. So appreciate each and every one of you taking some time out of your night, spending it here to interact with us and talk Bills. We see you and we love you. And on behalf of Joe DeRosa and producer Chris, who's not here with us tonight, but will be back with us next week, and on behalf of my handsome partner in crime, Greg Thompson, I am Aaron Quinn. You have been listening to the Cover One Buffalo podcast, and we are out.